All right, so hello everybody. This is a book talk for a book I chose to actually use with my tutoring student this semester. It is actually called Piecing Me Together by Renee Watson. It is a Newbery Honor book. That's the little seal right there. It also was a Coretta Scott King Award winner. That's the seal right there. So it's a totally legit book. I chose it mainly because my student was part African American, part Puerto Rican, and the main character in this book is part African American and part Latina, and her name is Jade. I try to pick books for Helena that I hope she really connects to. Last year, I used a book called Parrots Over Puerto Rico that really worked well because she had just gone on a trip to Puerto Rico because her family is from there. And then I used the book Booker T. Washington, 50 Cents in a Dream, and she told me she really enjoyed that because her school just did an entire lesson on Booker T. Washington, so she really enjoyed that because she got to learn more things about him as a younger child, why education was so important to him, things like that. So this book is similar to that. It's set in modern times rather than a historical book. Jade is a young woman who is in high school. Her mom is a housekeeper. She has an uncle, and then she doesn't really know where the father's at, and it never really comes up in the book till way later. Her mom wants the best for her, so she sends her to school across town to a private school that is filled with kids that aren't like Jade. And when I say not like Jade, I mean a minority. So they're mostly white kids. She takes the bus to get there. She has the typical daily life of someone who isn't necessarily impoverished, but doesn't have the life that the other children at her school have. So she gets on the bus and goes home to a completely different reality than they do. She has a couple friends in the book that still go to her old school, so at her new school she doesn't really have any friends. So at this school she is presented with the opportunity to get a mentor. And she doesn't really know what a mentor is going to do for her, but her teacher says for people with circumstances like her, it's a good idea. It basically is to expose her to other things than what she's getting from her schooling there. So she meets the mentor, and the mentor is a fairly young African American woman in her early 20s. And Jade doesn't really want the mentorship because she just wants to get out of where she's at, go somewhere else, and begin building a new life. I mean, the first words of this book are, if I can find the page, to give myself a way out, a way in. Basically, she wants a way out of her life so she can get herself into a new life. And I was right. Helena did really enjoy this book. Actually, she wants to keep it, but I had to take it back to do this. And for this, for a before reading activity, you can do it. You can kind of peruse the book, talk about certain topics that are related to it. You can start with the KWL chart. I don't necessarily think that worked really well for this book, but I do know that when we kind of talked as we were going through the book, like a prediction worksheet works really well because the artwork is pretty. I don't know, it's pretty expressive, and if you just kind of go through it with the student and just kind of give a brief summary of things like what do you think this is going to do, and you can also do you think you're going to find things in common with this book, which is I think really important, especially if you're dealing with subject matter like this. If they can connect to it, it's a really cool thing. And during reading of the book, This book's it was a little more difficult than I probably should have picked, but I wanted to pick it because I knew she'd really like it. There's a lot of words in here that I knew she wouldn't know. So as far as we're going through the reading process, so during, I try to do as many vocabulary things as I could think of. The first one was just the good old match the word to the definition, and then use those words to kind of tell the story a little bit of what you've already read. And then the one she really liked was the bubblegram. It's the straight up bubblegram. And again, at the end of each of these activities, I kind of always try to make her write something using the words and the vocabulary that she has learned. So those worked really well. She really liked the bubblegram, which was really cool. And every time we stopped reading, so after we're done with the section and we kind of sit down and talk about it and she does some work, I always try to have her kind of go through the questions and see if the answers to the questions I come up with, like just, and I have all kinds of them. I have summary questions, I have theme questions, I have how do you relate to the main character, and just even identification questions, just to make sure that she knows who's important in the story and who's not. And I also kind of always like to go back to the prediction part of it and see if her predictions of what the book was going to be about and what might happen next came true, or if she was right, not come true because it's already there. But if her predictions were correct, and then also that can move into another thing. What do you think is going to happen next? And you can always bring it all back and ask her if she relates to the story in any way, and if the character is important to her. But overall, this is actually, because I've read most of it because I'm reading it with her, but it's actually a pretty good book, and it's kind of fun, kind of heartfelt, kind of poignant, and it's just really, it's a really good book for like kids who are minorities, who kind of don't fit into where they go to school, or just are a little bit different than everything that's around them. So I highly, highly recommend it. So that's this book talk. I'm Kevin. Have a good night.